And now the moment you've all been waiting for, spent an entire week waiting for, that is. Lock the doors, take the phones off the hook, and settle back for another AskOkey podcast, where we bring you laughs, wisdom, information, and all kinds of other stuff. Welcome from Studio One. I'm Pete, as you know, and I have with me, as always, the Proff. Proff, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you, Pete, for asking.
Most welcome, most welcome. I'd like to start off with the formalities, even though I've seen you since the last time. Interesting question comes to us, and that is, when Proff is not on camera, is he in fact wearing a T-shirt and a pair of jeans and possibly a pair of crocs? Inquiring minds want to know this.
Well, I do occasionally wear jeans, and you may every now and then find me in a T-shirt, especially in the summer when it gets quite warm and humid in these parts. But typically when I'm not on duty, which is when I'm not in the office with you, or when I'm not on stage here with you, I typically wear whatever the occasion calls for. So if it's a casual occasion, I can often be seen wearing khakis or what you might call chinos with a simple casual shirt, usually a pop-over shirt or one of our cam collar shirts.
Right.
And a blouson or a jacket, again, depending on the time of the year, on the climate.
So there you
go. The short answer is I do not sleep in a three-piece suit.
There you go, everybody. Now, sorry, there's your answer. But on that subject, we've had an interesting query from somebody on YouTube. He asked if we can make a pair of durable, comfortable trousers for a construction worker, or as he said, blue-collar worker. And that sort of sounds like what they call workwear. Can we do it?
Well, of course, Pete. I mean, everything we do here is bespoke.
Right.
And so we have what you call some foundational models. Other than our dressy models, we do make chinos, of course, as you know. Either as flat front chinos that can be worn sort of semi-dressed up, or we also make cargo pants, which are a bit more, let's say, casual.
Yeah.
Now, for workwear, especially for working men, I'm a big fan of dungarees, for instance, because they're just very comfortable. You put them on and you forget them, and you go about your work. Essentially, they are casual pants with built-in suspenders.
Yes.
And as we know by now, suspenders function much better than belts.
Yep.
So we could certainly make cargo pants with an attached pair of suspenders, in other words, sort of like an improvised pair of dungarees. That's what we do. So if the customer specifically requests something like that, of course, we're happy to make them cargo pants, and we have a number of customers who've ordered cargo pants. I do own quite a few myself. But if someone, say, for instance, wanted something that was a bit more functional, like a pair of cargo pants with an attached pair of suspenders or sort of dungaree style, certainly something we could do.
And it would take into account the need for mobility that a worker on a site needs. So he's climbing up ladders, leaning down, moving around. He doesn't want something constrictive.
Well, that is the whole point of dungarees or suspenders, because when the trousers are cut rather full, especially around the hips and thighs and legs, right? It allows for mobility. And then the point of suspenders or dungarees is such that you don't have to adjust the trousers.
Yeah, of course.
You just put them on, you latch on you basically adjust the suspenders, and you're done. You just leave them on. That allows you to focus on your work.
Indeed. And so these dungarees, what are they made of?
So we use very heavy drill cotton. Specifically, there's a line, the Mesolay line that Harrison's of Edinburgh, our fabric partner carries. They typically come in at around 550 grams per square meter. So that is very, very good, heavy, you could go heavier than that. Some use canvas, or some would call duck cotton. Which is sort of water resistant.
Yes.
It's water resistant, and it's got other properties. So if you're doing very hardy work that sort of requires a lot more durable, we could probably explore that.
Yeah.
However, for the, let's say, everyday person who just needs a hard-wearing pair of trousers or work trousers, I think the Mersolé line, it's basically it's a very heavy cotton. About 550 grams. That's typically what we recommend for heavy-duty chinos or workwear.
Yeah, that's almost canvas.
It is quite heavy. I mean, it's 550 grams is quite chunky. I personally like them. They're very heavy, they're hard wearing, and you certainly get a lot of use out of them.
So logically, I mean, if you're going to be working in construction, or you're going to be building a railroad or doing anything arduous, you need to have that ability to move around in them.
Correct.
At the same time, they have to be strong enough to withstand the sort of wear and tear they're going to get, but they can't be so strong that you can't move in them.
Well, I mean, again, the cloth fabric, it depends on the quality of the fabric, right? Good cotton is hard, but it's supple, and it responds to motion, so it moves around. So, say, for instance, as opposed to, say, denim, right? Denim is a bit more rigid.
Right, okay.
Right? So, a lot of workers these days wear denim for work because, quote unquote, they're supposed to be more hard wearing, but a lot of the denim out there can be quite uncomfortable. Just the fabric itself is very, very uncomfortable, unless it's well worn in, which takes years and years. But cotton is something where you can break it in easily with a few washes. So even with heavy drill cotton, put it in the washer a few times and it softens up a little bit.
And denim is, of course, a kind of cotton.
It is cotton.
Now, we had another query related to that. He said, what do you think of the Japanese selvage denim?
Well, Japanese selvage denim is the Rolls Royce of denim, as far as I know. I am not a denim expert. There's some denim heads out there who could sort of tell you everything about, all sorts of denim and their provenance. But I do know that I own a couple of pair of Japanese selvage denim. And they're generally held up to be the best quality out there.
Why? What makes it different?
I am not sure exactly. Like I said, I'm not a cloth technician or a denim expert, but they do have the reputation, certainly. And any serious jean head or denim head certainly owns more than a few pair of Japanese selvage denim.
Interesting. So there's a lot of choice then in the kind of denim you can get if you want to get them made for yourself.
Certainly, you can obviously source the fabric from the Japanese manufacturers. And I'm not sure they're only made in Japan, but they call it Japanese selvage denim. I'm not sure if that's because they're only made in Japan or it's just sort of a label for them. Of course, if you can source the fabric, right, we can make you anything in it.
Yes.
And if the customer specifically requests it, we're happy to source a fabric vendor that supplies that specific type of denim.
So there you go. Then, hence the point about being bespoke, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you
create your own dreams, and we make it come alive.
And we make them come alive. Very true. Now, on that note, it's 21st of March. First day of spring in North America, certainly. And we're talking about springtime clothes and springtime fabrics. And I notice that you are wearing the springtime safari.
Yes.
We've shown this on a podcast before, but not actually you wearing it.
Correct.
So this is a first, everybody. You're getting this a world event here. Proff's wearing the very first AskOkey safari jacket. It's a premiere. And tell us about it.
Well, this is certainly a garment which has been highly requested. As you're aware, we launched the Tiba jacket or Tiba jacket some seasons ago, maybe a couple of seasons ago. It was well received. We've received quite a few orders from customers. They loved it because people, a lot of men want an alternative to your conventional sport coat, something a bit more casual that can be dressed down. So that was very well received. However, we kept receiving a lot of echoes for a conventional or traditional safari. So as you know, as with all things, we had to go to the drawing board and design one entirely from scratch. Now, the safari is a very classic garment. You know, we don't claim to have to be the holy grail or to have invented it, so to speak. And I think the beautiful thing about the safari is that everyone has their own interpretation of it.
Of course.
It's not as, let's say, it's not as confined as, let's say, a standard double-breasted jacket or a single-breasted jacket might be. With the safari, you have a lot more room for creative expression.
Yes.
You can do that with the collar, with the lapels, with the pockets, with so many things. So here we went to work and we basically created our own version from scratch. And it's basically, if you don't mind me standing up.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
So it's basically a standard coat here. Here we've gone with a 3-button. Some do make theirs with a 4-button configuration.
Right.
Without a lapel, with just sort of a little kind of a shirt collar. So we've gone for a short lapel here and kept it, you know, to a 3-button. And what we've done is that we've used standard patch pockets in the bellow pocket. So basically, bellow is sort of means it pops open right there. And it's 4 pockets, 2 here and 2 up here. Some prefer their pockets pleated. There's so many things you could do with safari. Some might sort of pleat their pockets. Some might sort of have them a bit more
bellowy,
or so to speak, or larger. But what we wanted to do was to produce something distinct, but still sort of close to classic in its overall look. So again, if I turn around, some actually have them done with a belt.
A little belt at the back,
with a little belt in the back, sort of in a no-fork style. Sort of, it would look sort of like a no-fork style. But we wanted, again, to keep it very, very simple, at least the prototype. Now, if a customer requests a belt or half belt in the back, of course, we're happy to do so. If they request a full belt, which is also an option for a safari, you know, we're happy to do so.
Or you could just put belt loops. So they could put their own belt loops
there, and you can sort of wear your own belt. So there you have it. It's just this is our standard model. For the prototype, I've gone for this soft lavender color.
Right. Yes.
It's not quite a pink.
No.
It's a very soft lavender color, and the reason is that, as you know, we're bringing this out in the spring.
Right.
So I thought about what colors might be suitable for
indeed,
for a spring summery jacket. And so that color, as Jay-Z would call it, mauve.
Is that what Jay? Who's Jay? Sorry,
Jay-Z, the rapper.
Oh, right. Yes.
The hip hop artist.
Yes.
We'll call it mauve. So there you have it, and you know, in true summer fashion, we have it paired with the cream-colored
gabardine pants.
Gabardine pants, and just sort of
very good.
A very classic summer, and sort of a linen shirt underneath.
It's certainly a contrast to the usual, you know, Prince of Wales and Gun Club and that sort of thing. The common or the well-known AskOkey fabrics.
Yes.
And it's an interesting color combination, and it follows up a question that somebody had on the YouTube about different colors. And that mauve or lavender, as you call it, with the pale cream gabardine is quite an interesting combination. I guess you could have maybe gray, light gray.
Correct.
Or you could have maybe dark blue in the lower half.
Yes, anything that provides some, again, this goes back to color theory. So you're either going for contrast or you're going for sort of harmony or sort of a softer contrast.
Right.
So if you want to produce a sharper contrast, then you probably want to go with a darker pair of trousers, something like a dark navy.
Right.
Or even sort of a dark gray.
Yep, okay.
Like a dark gray would work.
Sure.
If you want to go for sort of more of a soft transition, then something like this, sort of you want to sort of stick with colors in sort of a similar family. So this is a softer transition.
Right,
a dove gray also would be a softer transition.
Yes.
So again, depends on sort of what you wish to communicate with your your colors.
But that design of jacket, of course, I mean, you don't have to wear it only when you're shooting defenseless animals or racing around the Serengeti, chased by lions. You could wear it in a town. I mean, it is a perfect idea for a casual weekend jacket.
Absolutely. Another way I would wear this, obviously, would be with an ascot.
Mm-hmm,
I would wear it with sort of a camp collar shirt, or what we call our AskOkey Cooper collar shirt.
An open shirt,
An open shirt with an ascot, just something a bit more airy and breezy. But because, of course, I'm on duty, as it were, I'm compelled to wear a necktie.
Indeed, but you could get it. I presume you could make it, aside from the linen that you're using, you could make it in cotton.
You could make it in cotton. You could make it in linen. You could make it in. Actually, you could even make it in tweed.
You could, couldn't you? Yes.
Depending on the use or sort of the season. But if you like the design, it can be done in tweed. It could easily pass with a few adjustments or sort of with few additions. It could pass for a Norfolk jacket.
Yeah, the only thing with tweed is you'd have a job doing the pattern matching with the pockets, wouldn't you?
Well, we do that.
That's true. Yeah,
we do that. All that's part of the job. That's part of what we do.
Yes, indeed.
You just need a bit more fabric. So when you're working with complex patterns, of course. So typically, a jacket might require 2.5 meters for an average size gentleman, 2.5 to 2.7 meters. When we're working with large patterns, such as the pattern you have over there.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
We typically ask for a little bit more, say about an extra 30 centimeters or an extra half a meter, because pattern matching to get the pattern matching right, you need you just need a lot more cloth.
And for our American viewers, a meter is 39 inches, so it's just a little bit more than a yard. Now, on that subject, we've had a query from one of our viewers. He said, how much material would I need he said, as a man who's a size 48 or between a 48 and a 52, so say around a size 50, how much material would he need for the jacket and trousers, given AskOkey's more generous cut in the trousers?
So 48 to 52, I would presume them to be a UK size, because 48 EU.
No, 48 US.
US. Okay,
I would think,
so US. So which is so the EU is about 10. So 48 means 58 EU. So this is a big fellow.
Yeah.
I wear, or in my ready-to-wear days, I used to, based on my current size, I would size anywhere between sort of around 54.
Really?
Or 44.
Yeah, I'm a 44. I'm a size 44.
So I would size anywhere around a 44. But then again, because, I'm somewhat abnormal in my build, it would fit me in certain areas and it wouldn't fit in other areas, but that's a story for another day. But going back to your question, for a gentleman who's size 48 to 52, that's a big fellow. I reckon for our cut, I typically use, for a two-piece suit, I could get away with 4.5 meters. And the math is usually 2 meters for my trousers, because we cut them high-rise and cut them full. So about 2 meters minimum for my high-rise trousers and 2.5 meters for my jackets. And that is assuming they're just plain fabrics.
Right.
Not patterns. With patterns, like I said earlier, you need to sort of add a few more yards, a few more centimeters or meters. So for a gentleman who's got to be a good size bigger than I am, I would reckon at a minimum 5 meters.
Right.
Minimum. For a margin of safety, I would even sort of go 5.5 meters, just to be sure. So I don't know how tall this gentleman is. If it's a size 48, I'm not sure if it's, 48 and portly.
I'll just
48
check here.
And say 6'4".
We don't know the height.
Right. So it's going to depend on the the customer's height.
Right.
As well as, 48 obviously just means the breadth of the chest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or shoulders.
Yeah.
So, but at that size, typically, I would reckon let's say it's around 6 feet tall, right?
Yes.
I would certainly suggest, between 5 meters and 5.5 meters.
And if it's a big pattern, like that one, for example, of the front there, if it's a big pattern, you need a bit more. If it's plain, you can do with a little bit less.
Absolutely.
And this one here, interestingly, because so we've talked just about the fabric there. This fellow asks here, his name is, by the way, at DLTZ8YH. If you're watching, DLTZ8YH, shout out to you. How much of one man's monthly income should he spend on his main overcoat, suit for work, and suit for outings? There we are.
Well, Pete, you probably have a more refined answer to that question, because I remember you once brought it up, how back in the day there used to be a formula where I think it was a year salary.
No, not a year's salary, 2 weeks salary.
Or 2 weeks
Your
salary.
first suit in New York, your first suit working in, I don't know, a lawyer's office or in a bank or something, 2 weeks salary was about what you'd figure you'd have to spend.
So there you have it. I'm not sure how much things have changed since then, but if you reckon, and again, I don't want to invite.
Well, that was usually a Brooks Brothers suit. You see, that was not necessarily a bespoke suit.
Bespoke suit.
No.
So I don't want to invite a storm in the comment section by a lot of people who might say you're tone deaf and probably not in touch with, or out of touch with the average person. I mean, what does the average person earn? You reckon?
Yeah.
I mean, what's your guess?
Well, if you look at official statistics,
the average working man.
The average working man. So, if you look at the official statistics of, say, household income in, for example, Canada, I think it's $70,000. So, what's that per week? Divide that by 50, and you've got sort of 8,000 or something like that. You see, so you'd be looking at probably, 2 weeks. 2 weeks' wages would be about $4,000, roughly.
So 70,000, so that's...
Say
that's
3,000.
6 times 12 is 72.
Sorry,
right?
sorry, yes.
So that's 6,000 a month.
So
right?
so 3,000.
So that's about 3,000.
Now, if we take that's before tax.
Before tax. But
So I
let's
think
just keep
after
it
tax,
simple.
but we'll keep it simple.
Let's keep it simple and say it's $6,000 a month. Let's just forget the tax for now. So you're looking at about 3,000 every 2 weeks, right? I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, you're not buying a suit every 2 weeks.
Right, but that's the number, right?
That's about the number you'd be looking at, yes.
2 week salary is $3,000. I think it's not unreasonable to spend $3,000 on a good suit.
No, even ready to wear, depending where you go, you could easily spend that. Even ready to wear.
I mean, you can find suits for $500, $600 at Suit Supply.
Yeah, but they wouldn't last very long.
They're not the kind of suits that...
No, they lose their shape very quickly.
Right.
You wear them a couple of times and they've lost their shape.
If you're looking for fast fashion suits, you could get them $500, $600. But if you're looking to build a true, quality wardrobe that is going to stand the test of time, I think with $3,000, you can get a very decent off-the-rack suit.
Yeah, so if DLTZ8YH, if you're listening, get back to us if you'd like some more information about this, and we'll be very happy to give you some more information. Now, following that, interesting questions here about men's jewelry. And can Prof not pontificate, what's the word I want, discourse a bit on the subject of rings, cufflinks, and various jewelries that men might wear?
We've done a reel on this, Pete. We did some time ago. I believe it was sometime last year during the fall. And my view was I'm a very, if I can use the word simple, I'm a very simple man. I keep it very simple. The only jewelry I wear, as you know, are going to be my wristwatch. And on the occasion that I'm wearing French cuffs, you might find me wearing a pair of cufflinks, and that's about it. Right. I don't wear any other jewelry, and that's just my own personal. However, there are those who like to wear signet rings and other memorabilia. Some even prefer to wear like a bracelet. I mean, that's really up to them. I won't call them, I won't say it's proper or not. I just, it's just not my style. However, there are other ways. I think there are very discreet ways to employ jewelry, such as lapel pins,
Right.
tie pins,
Right.
very, very discreet items that you could use to embellish your overall outfit without, screaming undercover Italian mob.
Right. And of course, you have the cufflinks, as you said. If you wear a shirt with cufflinks, you can have cufflinks.
One place to really, of course, the exception being your evening clothes. And evening clothes, of course, are a place for you to sort of be a bit more exuberant.
Flamboyant.
So flamboyant.
Yes.
So you can wear your colorful waistcoats and your embroidered dinner jackets and shirt studs and all sorts of and all manners of things.
I suspect the rule ought to be, if you don't have really good jewelry, don't wear any. Do you know what I mean? And so if you can afford a gold bracelet or whatnot, go ahead. But if you can't, best just to keep it really basic. And as you said, wristwatches. And we've had several inquiries for a podcast episode about wristwatches. So I think people are interested in that.
Yes.
I'm afraid I don't know enough about them to talk for an hour. You probably do. So we could choose that as a subject for one of the podcasts.
Yes, I get the requests often as well in the comment section. And I mean, watches are a thing for a lot of men. And if you think about it, a lot of men spend a fair amount on watches because it is the one piece of jewelry, right?
That's right.
Whereas women have earrings and this and that. A man can just basically dump all his resources in a wristwatch and say, well, that's the only piece of jewelry I wear, perhaps justifiably. So I am personally not a collector. I own just 2 watches. I own this sport watch, which I tend to wear with my more sporty outfits, and I own a dress watch, which is sort of a classic black strap rose gold case, which I wear with more serious or sort of conservative suits. But besides that, I'm not one for. I already have I have a lot of expensive mistresses in the form of habits. So wristwatches, unfortunately, one of those mistresses that I've managed to keep at bay for some time.
Yes, indeed, yes.
But my dream watch, if when the day comes, is a Lange & Söhne. It's a Swiss German brand. It's called A. Lange & Söhne, and the Tourbillon, which is sort of like there's the Lange 1 Tourbillon.
And what's the big deal about them?
It is a magnificent timepiece. I mean, people go nuts about all sorts of, the Patek, of course. Patek Philippe is sort of up there. The younger crowd go for the RM, Richard Mille. There's the AP, Audemars Piguet. There's so many beautiful names out there. But Lange & Söhne I love because it is understated. Not many people know about it. It's just sort of it's kind of the whisper, like the quiet. If you know, you know. It's sort of like the secret gentleman's watch. So, and I came across one many years ago. It was a little bit out of my budget at the time, but I just never forgot about it. Which was the basic Lange & Söhne. And I said, well, if I have to wait, then I have to make it worth my while. And so the tourbillon, which is it has a very complex movement. And if you're into watches, those who are into watches would know what a tourbillon is, which is sort of like saying it's like a much more, it's a highly limited edition of a Rolls Royce almost. So I told myself that one day, if I do make it big, actually I did tell Suresh, who's our COO.
Yes.
That if he wants to buy me a gift, in the event that one day we hit a significant milestone, then it would be the one.
Really? Interesting, because there's a guy that was, in fact, I think, possibly our very first customer in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Corey Cavalieri.
Corey, yes.
And he knows a lot about watches.
Absolutely.
He's quite a collector.
He's a collector and he resells as well.
Right, okay. Yeah. I've never understood the fascination with watches. I mean, if it works, if it ticks, then fine, it's a watch and it ticks. But there are people, and you obviously have an eye for watches, who really appreciate, for example, the workmanship that goes into the insides of them, and the design, I suppose, the outside design.
It is a culture and a community, much in the same manner that a lot of people don't understand why you fuss over the shape of
indeed, yes.
The shape of the collar or the lapel
yes.
or the roll of the lapel or whether it's half canvas or fully canvas. The people who would never understand your obsession with those details, right? No. So in the same way, I think in the watch community, there are some of these nuances that you and I may never, just because I don't have that depth of interest. But if you did have that interest, I'm sure you would take the pains to understand those things as well.
Yes, and it's like collecting stamps or anything, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You have to, it's something that you're curious about, you're interested in, or you're not. Watches, really good watches, fetch the most phenomenal prices.
Correct.
Even not very interesting watches seem to fetch phenomenal prices. Correct. I don't know what it is. Is it the material that's used? Is it the amount of work that's required to make it? And presumably a lot of them are made in factories. Very few, I would imagine, are actually made all by hand. Maybe this Lange & Söhne that you're talking about is probably made by hand.
Well, a lot of the very high-end watches are still made by craftsmen.
Okay.
And which is why they're that expensive.
Right. Okay.
A lot of them, the Pateks, when you go up there at the sort of at the upper echelon, they're still made by in very, very careful detail by craftsmen, and that's why they charge that much.
Interesting. But even what I would call mid-market watches that I see in shops fetch a remarkably high price.
Well, some of them, such as, again, I'm not by any means a watch expert, but there are sort of certain Rolex models, for instance, that fetch enormous sums. And I think a lot of those come down to their sort of limited editions, say, models that are out of production or that are limited. There's so many factors that drive the market, right? So again, this is all sort of secondary market. So there's so many factors that drive pricing for any product at all on the secondary market.
Interesting. So there we have it, jewelry and watches. Now, noticing I periodically watch or look at what one might call the fashion press, just to keep an eye on what's going on out there. And I've noticed a kind of a trend towards, you see this with, what are they called? Runway shows. Seems to be a trend towards the looser fitting garment these days. I've noticed this. Have you?
Of course. If you've been paying attention, I'm on social media every day. So
True.
It's part of my job description. So, there are a lot of, everybody's coming out with, YSL, just name it. All the typical suspects are coming out with fuller cuts. And of course, you can trust designers to always exaggerate, to sort of overshoot. So some of the things you see on runway are going to be like super, super baggy. Again, these are all sort of kind of what I would call artistic expression. So I don't expect that they expect people to wear that on the street or to work. But it is coming back. And in fact, there was an article on the Financial Times yesterday or 2 days ago. And it talked, sort of one of the writers took literally a whole page to talk about the renaissance of the full cut and expressing his delight at the return of the full cut, the drape cut. The title of the article was "Let It Drape," and good riddance to the skinny fit.
Right. Okay.
So what began as a whisper a few years ago when you and I started this shall I call it a campaign or this gospel of drape. What started as a whisper is now turning into a chorus, it appears.
But what's curious is that although people say that, the guy who wrote it probably wears skinny pants. I mean, people say, oh, isn't this wonderful? But do they really do it? Do they walk the walk, Okey, in the way that they should? This is the question.
Well, Pete, this comes back to the subject we discussed in the last podcast about availability.
True. And by the way, several questions on that last podcast that I've noticed from viewers about this, talking about this, saying, where can I get it?
Correct. So I think, again, having a front row seat in the comment section, the biggest question is, well, now we understand the theory behind the drape cart and the philosophy, but where do we find it?
Right. Well, where you find it.
Where do we find it? Well, not where do we find. Of course, you can find it at AskOkey, but when they say where do we find it, they mean where do we find it at sort of at ready to wear reasonable prices.
Sure.
And it's very difficult, right?
It is.
To get the cost down for any item, right? To get the unique cost of any item down, right? It has to be mass produced. And the reason why our clothes are expensive, well, quote unquote, cost what they cost. They're not expensive. They are costly, right? It's funny. Somebody explained the difference between, I think it was the CEO of Hermes.
Right.
Someone says your handbags or your items are expensive. He says no, items are not expensive. They are costly because they cost a lot to make.
Indeed, yes. Of course,
an expensive item is something that is basically overpriced and not worth.
That's true. That is quite true. Yes.
Our clothes are costly. They're not expensive.
Yes.
And they're costly because they require, there's a lot of inputs, the labor input, the material, that's what it costs. Yeah. To be able to produce what we produce at scale will require a manufacturing process. And, so then we're talking about things like made to measure and ready to wear. And as we very carefully laid out in that last podcast, our general business plan or our roadmap to get from where we are today, which is a bespoke shop, to made to measure, and ultimately to ready to wear.
Yes.
So by the time we get to ready to wear, I use the example of Tesla and the Model 3. By the time we get to the Model 3, which is sort of a publicly available, widely available model at a lower price, right? It would take we would have to go through that process.
Yep.
So when a lot of men complain that, well, where do I find them? It's because I think the mainstream manufacturers still haven't gotten the memo, so to speak. Either that or they just haven't retooled or don't want to go through the process of retooling to create sort of a more roomy cart.
Yes, and there's a challenge, and you know what I mean. The challenge is this, that the roomier cut, if it's done in poor quality fabric, very quickly
it looks bad.
Starts to look terrible. Yeah. Now the skinny ones, even in a poor quality fabric, look pretty awful. They don't look quite as awful as the looser ones, which very quickly get baggy in the knee and start to flop. And perhaps that's part of the challenge, is that if you're going to sell for these very, very low prices, you have to use appallingly bad cloth, which really doesn't stand up to more than probably, well, maybe 50 wears. And this, in other words, at the end of a year, it's gone. If you're going to use that sort of fabric, you can't really achieve the full cut, which requires, as you said a couple of podcasts ago, requires real talent to make and has to be done. So, in other words, it's much harder to make them than it is to make the cigarette, the two cigarettes. Right. And so perhaps that's part of the challenge, because I know that the cloth that we use is quite a big input into the price.
Of course.
And it's obviously, you're buying from Fox or you're buying from Dugdale or Harrison's, you're making something that's going to last for quite a long time. Whereas if you want something that's you're going to throw away at the end of the year, you don't want to spend so much money on it. But that's a challenge, is being able to make decent fuller cut in that sort of cheesy numbers, in those very large numbers that you would have to do. But yes, it's interesting, isn't it, that the fashionistas and the design houses have sort of come around, possibly because they figured, well, we've got to make something new in order to make people buy things. You know, because we can't sell them any more of what they've already got. Let's spice them up a bit.
Could be.
Now, this brings me to a question. Okay. Why is it that men don't wear skirts? Now, this is a serious question. Forget the fact that they don't want to look like ladies. Okay? But I'm just asking this because there are parts of the world where men still wear skirts. The Arabian Gulf, for example. Why is it that they've never caught on in other places? Because you could make decent ones. You could make them out of fox flannel. You could make them out of duffel coat material for tweed. I wonder why this is.
Well, Pete, we've had this conversation before. Remember, it was last year. There was a specific podcast where you actually brought up this point, you know.
Did I? Okay.
Yes. You know, why, how did it come about that we wore trousers?
Well, I know why it came about that we wore trousers, but I'm just wondering why. Because you see, you wear trousers if you have to do things, but so many men don't have to do anything anymore. They just sit in an office or at a desk. And I just was curious, if you think about it, what is the reason?
I think what we identified last time we had this conversation was it's just cultural. Think about it. It's,
fair enough. Fair enough.
Essentially the Anglo-Saxon sort of the English culture,
the European culture,
European culture basically covered the entire earth for a good number of centuries. True. So if you think back to the earliest memories of anything tailored, in fact, right, was about the period when the conquistadors, sort of all the European empires started to form.
True.
So they exported that culture, the culture of wearing breeches and trousers, right?
True.
To the hinterlands, to India, to Arabia, to Africa, to South America, and so on and so forth. And so what we have today is just a holdover, right?
I suppose, yes.
These and so, the Moors or the Arabs who wear these skirts, right? They had their empires, and there was a period, but they didn't last, right? So who knows? Had the Moors conquered, Europe, right? We might all be wearing,
long robes,
robes.
Yes.
But that's not the case, and the Eurocentric or Europhilic culture still. I mean, even in America, even Asia, is still very much present today, and I suppose that's why we don't wear.
That's why we don't wear it. Simple as that. Dresses. No, it just occurred to me something I was thinking about. Now, have you heard of Kit Blake?
I have heard of it, or him, or the brand.
Because some of the people on the social media have been mentioning Kit Blake as a reputable, decent supplier. And I wondered if you knew about him.
I don't know much. I can't speak to them. I've heard the name. I've heard the brand or the name mentioned in passing. But unfortunately, I don't know enough about the brand to say anything intelligent about it.
Okay. I suppose there are quite a few out there who are not exactly artisans, but sort of similar to that, like Scott Fraser making a limited line.
Yes, I am aware of Scott Fraser.
Yeah. And he's what's interesting about him is that he has a way of tying his creations or his designs to some sort of historical
Well,
model.
they call it Repro brands, right? So Repro.
Is it okay? It's a Repro brand, is it? Interesting looking stuff that he produces. I think in London.
Correct.
I think he has a shop in London where
And
he
then
sells
there's your friend Simon Is it Cathcart?
Simon Cathcart.
Right.
Well, Simon Cathcart, I don't know him, but I periodically look at his stuff. I get emails from him, and he definitely produces repro stuff. Much more than Scott Fraser does. And he's produced sort of Edwardian suits and things. I've never bought anything from him. There are plenty of people who absolutely swear by him. And he had an interesting pair of shoes that he produced a couple of years ago, sort of two-tone shoes with a strap on them. And a lot of people really like his stuff when you see them wearing it on Instagram. I think his business model, I think he gets fans to wear them. He gets customers to wear them.
I mean, there's a niche. It's a niche business.
Isn't
it's a niche product. And, Pete, there's a market for everything.
Yes.
That's why,
Yes.
like, literally there's,
Yes.
And that's the beautiful thing about, I don't care what product you come up with. If you look hard enough, you'll find a market.
You will. You will indeed. Now, one product that we haven't made at AskOkey, but we've had queries for, is caps. Newspaper boy caps or other similar cloth caps. And I guess that's something we could produce with the sort of fabric that we work with. Run up a couple of designs. Have you thought of getting into that?
It's these requests are one-off.
Right, okay.
And certainly it's something we could do if you wanted to, because we're always left with leftover fabric.
Yes.
So there's the odd, usually 30 centimeters, 40
Right.
centimeters
Yep.
that we have lying around.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we keep them, sometimes we throw them out. But if we were to adhere to the whole, in the spirit of sustainability, it would make sense to convert some of those, let's say, end bolts into things like hats. But it's just not something we've thought about, because we just don't, I don't get the sense that this is a lot of requests for it. There may be the odd request here and there. And, for those who want hats, they go to Lock & Co.
Indeed,
they go to Lock & Co. or
yes.
any of the other hatters who have been doing this for a very long time.
Indeed. I suppose it wouldn't be that difficult to make one. I mean, you could come up with a design. The tailoring part is probably fairly simple.
Yeah, but again, you have to set up a process for it.
True.
You have to train people to do it and
make a pattern.
It's make a pattern. It's not. It's quite a to do. So unless there's a demonstrably large market that justifies that investment in time and effort, right? Then it's just something you might do as a hobby.
Yes.
We might do on a lazy weekend.
Right. Yes.
But
yes.
it's not something that I would build a commercial enterprise around.
Well, I think you and I are both too busy to sit down on a Saturday and stitch caps for fun. But it's interesting, isn't it, that we get requests and queries for all kinds of things. But as you said, if you put all those requests and queries together, each one wants something slightly different.
Of course.
And unless you can bottle it, as an employer of mine once said, if you can't bottle it, there's not much use in it. So you have to be able to put it together and package it for sale.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Oki, for another podcast, another pleasant
that went by quickly.
Time spent. It did went by very quickly. And everybody out there, don't forget, like, subscribe, and obviously watch. We appreciate your comments. Tell us what you think. Let us know. And to all those who support us, who encourage others to watch us, thank you very, very much. We wouldn't be where we are without all of you.
Of course.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you.
Pleasure, Oki.
Always a pleasure.
Many of you out there watch us regularly, but very few of you actually subscribe to our channel. Now, I don't want to pry and ask you, obviously, deeply personal reasons that you have, for not subscribing. However, by subscribing, you will do yourself and us a favor. We'll be able to respond to your questions directly and bring you all the more interesting content, which is the reason that you watch us in the first place. So please, click the like button, hit the subscribe, and you'll make us all very, very happy. Bye for now.